Good morning. I am Annette Lovell, and I am honored to be your worship associate this morning. When we, as a religious community, and especially your ministerial search team, started on our journey over 2 years ago, we never imagined that we would be welcoming our new minister virtually. No dinners, no parties, no sharing of our joy and our energy. But we are trying to handle this new reality with grace and a lot of flexibility, and maybe a few head bangings on the side. But Reverend Kevin Carson is here today and ready to take his place as our new settled minister. We welcome him with open hearts and mind, and we welcome all of you that are joining us online today. We are excited to start this new journey together. We would like to start our time with a few announcements. First of all, please sign into the chat box. It's nice to see who is joining us live today. And second, if you want to share a joy or a concern later in the service, please type it in the chat box soon so that our wonderful tech team can pull them together. If you wait until we're to that part of the service, with a time delay, it can be missed. So remember to indicate whether it's a joy, a concern, or a sorrow up front, and then type the thought that you'd like to share with us today. And our last announcement is this afternoon at 12:30 is the virtual Women's Study Group Hour. If you did not get the email and references and want to join, please contact Elizabeth Coyote immediately following the service. Again, that's at 12:30. And just lastly, I want to say thank you to our audio technician, Andrew White, for making our service possible to be viewed online today. We could not do any of this without our tech team of Drew and Daniel. So now, let us prepare for our sacred time of worship with a few moments for quiet and meditation. Close your eyes, take deep breaths in and relax into your exhale. Listen to your breath and feel your lungs working in and out. Be present in this time and briefly let go of the anxieties, and I will ring our peace bowl 3 times. We will begin with our prelude. church's covenant was agreed upon many years ago, and we strive to live its principles in this UU community. I will read the words this morning, and I encourage you to recite it along with me in your own homes. Love is the spirit of this community, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Thank you. Our chalice is a sacred symbol to Unitarian Universalists around the globe. We share the lighting of the chalice in every congregation before each Sunday service, and even before important meetings or events. Our chalice lighting this morning is by Eric Williams, and I invite you to light your own chalice or a candle wherever you might be today. We will have Reverend Kevin lighting our chalice. In the beginning, there was light, infinite and expansive, flowing out from an unseen center. Throughout creation, there is light. From the steady sun, the glowing moon, the flashing meteor, the twinkling stars and auroras dancing in the northern skies. Within each part of creation, there is light, slowed down and held close by every cell and molecule, within each atom and element. Within you, there is light, the same light as the source, the same radiance that is in all creatures. May this small flame be a constant reminder to you of your true nature and your kinship with all beings.
Good morning. I am so happy to be here. And I could only be happier if all of you watching online were able to join us here in the church this morning. But I am grateful and thankful to be here and to be beginning this new ministry with all of you. Our call to worship this morning is from the poem Tintern Abbey by William Wordsworth. And I have felt a presence that disturbs me with the joy of elevated thoughts, a sense sublime of something far more deeply interfused, whose dwelling is the light of setting suns, and the round ocean, and the living air, and the blue sky, and in the mind of man. A motion and a spirit that impels all thinking things, all objects of thought, and rolls through all things. Therefore am I still a lover of the meadows and the woods and mountains and of all that we behold from this green earth, of all the mighty world, of eye and ear, both what they half create and what perceive, well pleased to recognize. In nature and the language of the sense, the anchor of my purest thoughts, the nurse, the guide, the guardian of my heart and soul, of all my moral being. I invite you to join Jessica in our opening hymn, number 42, Morning So Fair to See.
Today's Time for All Ages is Blowin' in the Wind, lyrics by Bob Dylan, illustrations by John Muth, sung by Clarissa. How many roads must a man walk down before you call him a man? How many seas must the white dove sail before she sleeps in the sand? Yes, and how many times must the cannonballs fly before they're forever banned? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. Yes, and how many years can a mountain exist before it is washed to the sea? Yes, and how many years can some people exist before they're allowed to be free? Yes, and how many times can a man turn his head and pretend that he just doesn't see? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. Yes, and how many times must a man look up before he can see the sky? Yes, and how many years must one man have before he can hear people cry? Yes, and how many deaths will it take till he knows that too many people have died? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. The end.
So this is our time to share our joys, our concerns, and sorrows with each other so that they may be lifted up in our UU community. We will read the emails that may have been sent earlier this week, and then the joys and concerns that have been posted in the chat box. If you have not already done so, please type in your prepared thoughts now, and hopefully they will be coming through quickly. So first of all, we have a joy and a concern from David Bogart. She writes, "My concern is that my grandkids are going back to school, and I am going to socially distance from them after that. But my joy is that we have made so many wonderful memories together this summer in this wonderful place that we live." We also have a joy from Mardi Carson, Reverend Kevin's wife, and she says, "Thank you for the welcoming baskets. I am loving this great state of Idaho." We hope they continue loving the great state of Idaho. And another joy from Molly Brinkerhoff. She and Tom celebrated their 42nd wedding anniversary this last Wednesday. Yay for them! And we have a few concerns. Bill and Cindy Miller write that their sweet friend Lucy Huffman has entered hospice care. Please keep her and her husband Richard in our hearts. And another concern from Catherine Giovanna. She says, my brother and his partner, my mother and my niece have all been evacuated from Ben Lomond, California because of the CZU fire consuming the Santa Cruz Mountains. It is possible that my brother's home and business will be burned, but at least he and the rest of the family will be safe. Are there any other? Okay. If there are no other joys or concerns in the chat box, we will light one more candle for all the joys, sorrows, and concerns that we hold in our hearts and choose not to share at this time. Know that we lift up our love for each other.
Our reading this morning is an excerpt from the book Reason and Reverence, Religious Humanism in the 21st Century by William R. Murray. In a fine book on secular humanism titled Humanism, Beliefs and Practices, British scholar Janine Fowler suggests that the word spirituality contains too much of the baggage of traditional religion for humanists. She therefore suggests we need a different word to describe what she understands to be the essence of spiritual experience. Spiritual experience, as Fowler understands it, refers to those times when the material world slips into insignificance for a moment or two, and the self experiences something of the depths of life, the quality of experience. It involves a suspension of ordinary perception and language, and it is usually stimulated by experiences such as an aesthetic awareness of beauty, the care of others, or a sense of awe and wonder at nature. These are moments when our egos are transcended. We experience a heightened awareness, a sense of unity and absorption in the object or activity, and we lose our usual sense of time and space. She then suggests that these are the very characteristics that humanistic psychologist Abraham Maslow described in what he called peak experiences. Fowler recommends that humanists use this phrase instead of the word spirituality. I have two problems with her suggestion. For one thing, I think spirituality is more than peak experiences, although that is certainly one part of what is meant by spirituality. I do not limit it to the experience of self-transcendence. For another, I think it is important for humanists to give our own meaning to words like spirituality, which I believe is a concept with many layers of meaning. One of my former students said that to her the word spirituality refers to love of the universe. As one who is filled with awe when I contemplate the beauty of the earth and the unimaginable vastness of the cosmos. I like that suggestion. To marvel at the beauty of a flower garden, the towering grandeur of an ancient oak tree, the majesty of mountain peaks, the remarkable instinctual behavior of birds and animals, the diversity of biological life, the literally millions of organisms from the submicroscopic to the mammoth, is part of what love of the universe entails. I invite you now to join in our second hymn, number 123, Spirit of Life.
Spirit of life, come unto me.
Back in 1998, my colleague, the Reverend Tom Owen Toll, published a wonderful little book titled Free-Thinking Mystics with Hands, Exploring the Heart of Unitarian Universalism. It is a short collection of his essays, one of those small, slim paperbacks you can buy at the UUA bookstore. And as the title suggests, he proposes that a concise description of who Unitarian Universalists are is that we are free-thinking mystics with hands. It is still my favorite short response to the question. In the introduction, he offers the following brief elaboration of what that means. Unitarian Universalists are free thinkers, unfettered pilgrims in search of governing truths. We are mystics as well, spiritually attuned to the marvels of the universe and awake to omens of the divine. We are also blessed with hands outstretched in praise, resistance, and caring embrace. Now, it is always problematic to try to generalize about such a diverse faith as ours, and I'm sure that some people may not completely agree with Owen Toll's assessment, but I think it's pretty accurate. It touches on our openness to religious exploration, our rejection of dogma, and our practical application of our values to the world we live in. Next week, I will speak more about the practical hands part of our faith. But this week, I want to explore this idea that we are mystics at heart. Let me say up front that I think we are mystics, and that a thread of mysticism has been woven into the tapestry of our faith for a very long time. So first, what do I mean by mysticism? It is an intriguing word that seems to connote something magical or occult. Indeed, the origin of the word comes from the Greek word mystikos, which alluded to the mysteries or secret knowledge among the ancient cults. It referred to those who were initiated into the secret knowledge they alone possessed. Am I suggesting that we Unitarian Universalists possess some secret or magical knowledge for the initiated? Of course not. Sorry to disappoint. And even if we did, I couldn't tell you in such a public setting. You can talk to me later about it if you know the secret handshake. The Oxford Dictionary offers two definitions for mysticism, but I don't find either one to be sufficient or broad enough for my understanding. First is belief that union or absorption into the deity or the absolute, or the spiritual apprehension of knowledge inaccessible to the intellect, may be obtained through contemplation and self-surrender. The second is belief characterized by self-delusion or dreamy confusion of thought, especially when based on the assumption of occult qualities or mysterious agencies. I can appreciate the conundrum the authors faced in trying to pin down a definition, since any talk of mysticism eventually bumps into the limits of language and begins to sound vaguely, well, mysterious. You may end up wondering in that dreamy confusion of thought the Oxford folks describe, because mysticism is ultimately about intuitive understanding, ineffable spiritual feelings based on personal experience. More often than not, it is easier to say what you did not or cannot experience on the sacred journey. For example, the beginning of the Taoist sacred text, the Tao Te Ching, begins by warning us that the Tao that can be spoken of is not the true Tao. And in Christian mysticism, mostly centered among the monastic orders, there's a long tradition known as apophatic mysticism, which claims that any mystical understanding can only be described in negation, saying what it is not, rather than trying to explain what it is. This is especially true for those intense moments of peak experiences described in our reading this morning. Those mystical moments that leave one feeling a sense of incredible unity or no-selfness. As a religious naturalist, I'm not suggesting there is something supernatural involved in such moments, but I will go so far as to say these are at least super mundane moments that transcend the humdrum of daily existence. And as William R. Murray expressed in the reading, I agree that spirituality is more than such peak or mystical experiences, but I think they are important to understanding the broader context of what I see as a UU mysticism. So let me say a little more about this. In his classic work, The Varieties of Religious Experience, based on a series of lectures given in 1901 and 1902, the philosopher and psychologist William James identified 4 characteristics of a mystical experience. First, it is transient and unpredictable. You cannot summon a mystical moment by force of will. They come and go as they please. The second characteristic is that you are a passive recipient of such moments. A mystical moment takes you by surprise. As Rabbi Lawrence Kushner, who I'll speak more about in a moment, says, you don't have the experience, it has you. The third characteristic James identified is that there is an intellectual component to the experience. It has what he called a noetic quality that leaves one with a flash of insight, revelation, or illumination. But sharing this insight is problematic because the fourth characteristic returns us to the familiar conundrum. A mystical experience is ineffable. Words fail to fully describe the experience. Try as we might, it is impossible to fit a mystical experience into a purely rational container. And this is why we need a religion that allows us to explore the meaning and sheer mystery of the sacred moments we encounter. Rationalism is not enough. As many of you know, for the last few years, one of the churches I have been serving in New England is our church in Chester, Vermont, about a 2.5-hour drive from where we lived in Rhode Island. Often when I preached in Chester, I would drive up on Saturday and spend the night, but sometimes I would drive up early on Sunday morning. One Sunday morning a few years ago, as I was driving up, I was listening to a program on the program On Being on WGBH, and the guest was Rabbi Lawrence Kushner. The program is a rebroadcast of a 2014 interview by the host Krista Tippett, and the topic of the program was Kabbalah and the Inner Life of God. Rabbi Kushner is a Reform rabbi and a longtime student of the Jewish mystic tradition of Kabbalah, in the lineage of the late teacher Rabbi Gershom Scholem. Scholem is credited with revitalizing interest in Kabbalah in the 20th century. I am no expert in Kabbalah, but here are some basics. There are many varieties of Kabbalah that range from a practical focus on ethics to the very esoteric. Some forms are centered on contemplation, for example, while others search for coded messages contained in the text of the Torah. There are some forms that have a doctrine of reincarnation, and others that focus on the feminine aspects of the divine. It is hard to generalize about the practices or beliefs of the Kabbalah tradition, but at its heart, Kabbalah is a search for understanding the relationship between the created world and the mysterious, infinite divine. In Kabbalah, all being is rooted in the Ein Sof, the holy oneness of creation. About halfway through the interview, Kushner was attempting to articulate the nature of mysticism, and here is how he described it. It is a handful of smoke. Yeah, it's real hard to talk about, but it's the most important thing to talk about. My suspicion is, and I don't know who said that, whatever it is that makes religion religion, mysticism has more of it. It seems to be freeze-dried. It seems to be intensified, focused. It's the name of the game. It's the very center of what we are talking about. Because, to be sure, mysticism is intensely personal, and that's what it always winds up doing for people. I love Kushner's analogy of mysticism as an intensified, freeze-dried experience of religion. If you've ever eaten a freeze-dried strawberry, for example, and tasted the explosion of flavor, I think you can appreciate what he was trying to say. Such a freeze-dried religion may or may not include traditional worship practices or rituals, but it is more intensely personal, inviting the sacred into our lives through an openness to the direct experiences of awe, wonder, and beauty. And seen through, and even though the mystic traditions often emphasize the need to be passively receptive to the sacred experience, it is by no means an easy spiritual path. Much of the spiritual work falls on the individual. Humanity has created many beautiful expressions of religion in our epic journey. Rituals and musics to inspire us, grand cathedrals and other holy places that seem to resonate with sacred presence. Sacred texts that contain the deep wisdom gained through generations of the human experience. But while these may help us cultivate a spiritual context, they are a layer removed from the mystical experience itself. Mysticism sets aside most of this cumulative tradition, sometimes even transcending the constraints of dogma and beliefs that differentiate the world's religions. It reveals how the essence of profound religious experience has similarities across cultures and time and space. Consider the Buddhist contemplative practices aimed at achieving emptiness, the dissolution of the idea of self and separateness, or the experience of divine union, or so-called Christ consciousness sought by Christian mystics through the ages. For religious naturalists, there is a mystical recognition of our ecological self, the recognition that our own being extends beyond our physical bodies into an inseparable relationship with the Earth's living systems and even the inorganic processes that support life. No matter where your mystical path begins, it seems to lead to a sense of unity and interconnectedness. And if you're fortunate enough to enjoy some of those peak experiences, it can be a life-changing journey. Some neuroscientists suggest that our brains may be hardwired to desire such mystical feelings. But whatever the case, there seems to be an undeniable, ineffable, but at the same time accessible something we can experience that feels sacred. And perhaps that is enough. As Unitarian Universalists, the first of the 6 spiritual sources of our faith affirms the direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder, affirmed in all cultures, which moves us to a renewal of the spirit and an openness to the forces which create and uphold life. The fact that it is the first listed source says something about the importance of mysticism in Unitarian Universalism. And it is easy to see how mysticism has evolved within the history of our living tradition. Even the ancient Christian thinkers like Arius and Origen, who contributed to the eventual development of both Unitarianism and Universalism, held mystic ideas about the soul and our relationship with the divine. But of course, the most dramatic expression of mysticism entered our faith story in the early 1800s, when the Transcendentalist movement developed primarily among the Unitarian churches in New England. Most Americans think of Transcendentalism as a literary movement, but it was really a major philosophical and theological shift. Thanks to a small group of young ministers and intellectuals such as Margaret Fuller and the Reverend Carl Fallen, a German immigrant who had studied in Europe, New England Unitarianism would never be the same. They studied European philosophers and theologians such as Kant, Fichte, Schleiermacher, and Feuerbach, and they began to transform what Emerson famously called the corpse-cold Unitarianism of the period. They especially began to look to nature as a source for direct spiritual experience and revelation in a time when the material world was held in little regard, merely a pool of resources for our exploitation, or the stage upon which God's plan for salvation would be enacted. They embraced a mysticism that allowed them to feel what Wordsworth so eloquently described as a presence that disturbs me with the joy of elevated thoughts, a sense of sublime, of something far more deeply interfused. They also began to challenge the dry rationalism that was so pervasive in the liberal Christianity of the period, and began what became a long history of holding reason in tension with experience, the experience of that transcending mystery and wonder. We UUs are rightfully guarded and suspicious of feelings that are unprovable, preferring reasonableness in our search for truth and meaning. But even as we use reason as a tool to probe the mysteries of existence, our exploration often ends up in feelings of piety and awe, feelings of wonder that hint at a profound spiritual truth. Reason is important, but we have kept the door open to trusting our intuition, cultivating what the theologian Friedrich Schleiermacher called a sense and taste for the infinite. It has now been roughly 2 centuries since the Transcendentalists came along and altered the trajectory of our faith, and many other influences have since made their own contributions. Our faith today is a celebration of transcendentalism and individual religious freedom, even as we hold on to the great spiritual traditions of the past and explore their wisdom for guidance for living in our own times. We embrace science and reason and spirituality as complementary aspects of what it means to be fully human. And this is our great strength. I would also say that our experience of religion is holistic. It is intensely personal, but at the same time, intensely unifying. I agree with Reverend Owen Toll, who characterized Unitarian Universalists as bona fide mystics because The substance of our faith points to an ineffable yet undeniable connection with sacrality, both mysterious and sustaining. That our lives are embraced by a mystery that is gracious and trustworthy, and our human fulfillment lies in surrendering to it. That is the ultimate point of our freeze-dried religion, after all, to find fulfillment in the search for truth and meaning, by opening ourselves to the experience of the sacred. So no matter what spiritual wisdom and practices you explore on your life's journey, let us embrace our essential mysticism and cultivate lives that are open to both peak experiences of transcending mystery and the small mystical moments of beauty and wonder. Time in a monastery or some epic pilgrimage may be a great catalyst to evoke a profound mystical experience, but I believe there is much that ordinary life has to offer as well. As we begin a new ministry together in a year that is fraught with discord, brokenness, contradictions, and incredible anxiety, it is my wish that all of us allow ourselves the grace of quiet time, time to sit and listen to the still, small voice within, time to nurture our inner mystic, time to acknowledge the gnawing suspicion of a hidden unity that brings a peace which passeth all understanding.
We are going to take a moment for our morning offering. Please use this time to visit our website, where you will find the Give button in the upper right-hand corner and pay via PayPal. You can write a check or sit in quiet contemplation, mulling over the thoughts that have been shared in the sermon today. If you decide to send a check, remember to send it to the church's P.O. Box. Thank you. We gratefully receive any offering that was given today and throughout the next week to come. Thank you. Our closing hymn today is number 126, Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing, by our wonderful Jessica. Please join us.
Our closing words today are from the poem A Common Destiny by David H. Eaton. All living substance, all substance of energy and being and purpose are united and share the same destiny. All people, those we love and those we know not of, are united and share the same destiny. Birth to death, this unity we share with the sun, earth, our brothers and sisters, strangers, flowers of the field, snowflakes, volcanoes and moonbeams. Birth, life, death, unknown, known, unknown, our destiny from unknown to unknown. I pray that we will know the awe and not fall into the pit of intellectual arrogance in attempting to explain it away. The mystery can be our substance. May we have the faith to accept this wonderful mystery and build upon its everlasting truth.
We will now extinguish our chalice with the following words. If you wish, please join me in the recitation. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And before we conclude the service, I would like to remind everyone that we will be having a 30-minute virtual coffee hour directly after the service. And the link should have been included in the email for today's service. It is time for our postlude. Be safe and be well.